ॐ नमो नारायणाय ॐ नमो नारायणाय
Asmat Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Paramagurubhyo Namaha, Asmat Sarvagurubhyo Namaha. So we're continuing with our discussion of Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism by Dr. V. Varadacharya of the French Indological Institute in Pondicherry. So we came to chapter 9, Agamas and Temples. So previous to this, we talked about the Agama Samhitas, the relationship between the Agama Samhitas and Sri Vaishnava, other Sri Vaishnava literature, and even before that, we had some general understanding of the philosophy of the Agamas. Now we're going to speak about the Agamas and how they relate to temples and temple worship. So the Agamas as a whole are based on the Vedas, and their concept of God is derived from them. But it is but natural that the supreme deity should be depicted as formless and beyond comprehension. Okay, so I think he should have put that the other way, beyond comprehension and formless. So when we say formless, when we say beyond comprehension, naturally we can't, with limited brain power, we can't conceive of something which is unlimited, except in academic terms. So in general academic terms, we can understand something to be unlimited, but a real understanding, a realization of the unlimited is very difficult for us with our limited powers of understanding. So if something is beyond comprehension, is completely unlimited, obviously it's difficult for us to think of it having some sort of form, because as soon as we think of something with a form, the form has limits. Right? The form will have limits. If we see something with a form, obviously there are limits to the form. So anyway, the finite instruments of man, in other words, our senses, our knowledge acquiring senses, and of his powers are totally inadequate to measure God and his powers. That makes a lot of sense. God becomes an object of adoration, and so he's represented as an embodiment of loving qualities and bliss. Right. So thus indicating the result of a development that is only of agamic origin. All right. So what he's saying basically here is that when we start to conceptualize about God, we think of God as being everything, God as being the universe, God as being the soul of the universe, this concept of sharira shariri bhava, that God is both the body and the indwelling spirit of the universe, and therefore we feel some sort of adoration or love for God because he is the creator and everything is coming from him. He's the source. So naturally, when we think of when we begin to adore or love God, then we naturally endow God with lovable qualities. Right? Nobody wants to love somebody who doesn't have lovable qualities. So when we start to love God, we associate lovable or good qualities, good lovable qualities to him. So even though the Upanishads might talk about God as being nirguna, as being without any qualities, right? The conception of nirguna for Sri Vaishnavas is not devoid of all qualities, but devoid of bad qualities and having all good qualities. Right? And similarly, the embodiment of God is called by Sri Vaishnavas Divya Mangala Vigraha, the auspicious Mangala, Divya, divine, Vigraha, form of God. So this concept of God should naturally be consistent with a way of worship and would be practicable for those who believe in it. Right. Okay. So once we have now decided that God as the creator, as the origin of everything, has to be adored and has to be loved and has all these auspicious, infinite auspicious good qualities, right? Then how do we worship God in that form, and how do we conceive of that form first, and then how do we perform worship of that form? Okay, so hence The Agamas invariably prescribe yoga as the means of moksha. Now, what exactly is meant by yoga here? He'll probably go into it and say, because yoga literally means joining with God or joining with something, right? Yoga usually means joining with God, the soul and the supreme soul joining. How do they join? Are they one by meditation? What form does that take? So here he says, control of the mind and concentration of mental activities, which form part of the yogic practice, are essential for offering worship. So worship should be offered in a mindful state. Everything should be done in a mindful way, not in an automatic way or a slack way or a loose way, but everything should be done keeping God in mind. And in fact, mental worship is considered better than external physical worship because the mind is fully engaged. So control of the mind is the very first thing. Therefore, stress is laid quite often on meditation. God, who becomes the object of meditation, is not formless, but has forms which represent different levels of realization, beginning from concrete appearance represented by the waking state and passing through the states of dream and deep sleep and culminating in the fourth state, which is the transcendental one. So these are the four states of consciousness. The ultimate reality is therefore called Narayana in the Pancharatra Agama and Sada Vishnu in the Vaikanasa Agama. And the quotation he's given here is from, it says here, SKS Brahma 6, 138 to 40. A note on the remark by S.N. Dasgupta in History of Indian Philosophy, Volume 5, page 172. We could look at that. That's a standard book on Indian philosophy. Okay, so let's continue on. The Sri Prashna Samhita, remember that Samhita, Panchatragama Samhita, which has to do with Sri Devi asking questions. That is called the Prashna means questions. So Sri Prashna Samhita means the questions of Sri Devi, right? Makes an excellent reference to the latter rise of offering worship to the Archa form of God. So in the temple and in the house also, but in the temple, we have this Archa Vigraha, the form of God which is worshipped. Right. So the Vaikanasa Agama also states that the act of worship as of two kinds, namely Amurtyarchana and Samurtyarchana. So the word murti means form, like Vigraha, right? So Amurti would be worship of God, Archana, Amurti would be worship of God, formless worship of God, worship of the formless God, and Samurti Archana is worship of God with a form. So the name of the former shows clearly that though worship, Archana, is undertaken, it is not with reference to the concrete form of God. It is held that the performance of Homa in fire constitutes Amurtyarchana. Okay, so there we are. So when we offer, like in the Vedic times when they offered sacrifice into the fire, or even today when there's certain smarta rituals are performed, we are offering into the fire, offering oblations into the fire. That is a form of God which has no, well, it has a physical form in the sense that it has flames. The fire has flames, but fire is the most subtle material element that we can see. So in that case, it doesn't really have a form of God. There's no concrete form of God. It's not a deity. We conceive of God as being present in the flames or accepting the worship through offerings put into the fire. Anyway, so this is one way of worshiping God, which is called Amurtyarchana, offering Homa. According to this Agama, right? Again, this would be Vaikanasa Agama. Does it say Vaikanasa Agama? Yeah, I think so. Yeah. This is to be done on the lines prescribed in the Vaikanasa Kalpa Sutras. Okay, so a Kalpa Sutra usually has to do with, but there are Vedic Kalpa Sutras, like, and there are commentaries on them like that. Kalpa means ritual, sutra means sutras, means short aphorisms telling us how to perform the rituals. So we have sutrakaras, we have people who comment on the rituals. So for instance, in Krishna Yajurveda, we have Dharma Sutras, and those Dharma Sutras have commentaries on them by sages like Apastamba and Bodhayana Hiranyakeshan, different persons who have given us the understanding of the sutras, like that. So here we have Kalpa Sutras or ritual sutras, right, which are according to the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras. And they probably also have commentators on them. So now both the Agamas, when we say both the Agamas, we're talking about Vaishnava Agamas, and that means we're talking about Vaikhanasa and Pancharatra, have developed mostly with reference to the worship of God in concrete form. The archa form is required to be created out of specific materials. Since Vishnu, with Shri, is considered to be the ultimate reality, the image of God as Varaha paved the way for the earth to be raised to the level of a goddess called Bhumi Devi, identified with Pushti. So we see this word Pushti is used in the Veda, right? I believe. And is it maybe in this Sri Sukta? Hrischate Lakshmi Chapatnyo? Hri may be another name for Pushti. I'm not sure. Okay, so Shri, she too was given the status of the form of an icon or a deity to occupy the place to the left of Vishnu. To the left of Vishnu. Okay, so when we say to the left of Vishnu, it means as we're looking at Vishnu, on the left hand, well, it seems to be on his left hand side, because Sri Devi is usually on his right hand side. Okay, the primary wife is usually, the primary consort is usually on the right hand side of the deity, our left as we look. So he's saying here the left hand side, meaning his left is Bhudevi. Right, so Neela came to occupy a place under the influence of the stories of Krishna. So Neela Devi, so we have these three main goddesses who are considered consorts of Lord Vishnu. We have Sri Devi, of course, having primary position as the first consort. Second, Bhumi Devi. So Sri Devi is on the Lord's right hand side, right? Because it's normal for the primary wife to stand on the right hand side, because a man's right side is considered more auspicious than the left side. So his wife will be on his right side, and her left side is considered more auspicious than her right side for ladies. So that will be towards the husband, right? On the other side of the person will be the secondary, or the wife who's in the secondary position, the consort. So that will be Bhudevi. And then on her side, on the other side away from Vishnu of her, is Neela Devi. So Neela Devi came to be associated also with, and sometimes people use the word Neela or Leela Devi, right? It has to do with Radha, or sometimes Nappinai in Tamil, or Pinnai, right? In the Tirupavai of Andal, there's this discussion about this gopi called Nappinai, right? Or Pinnai. Pinnai means young girl. Nappinai means young girl, like that in Tamil. So that Gopika was associated with Neela Devi. Neela Devi is a third consort of Lord Vishnu. So this is why he mentions the influence of the stories of Krishna, like that. Now, also in Pancharatra Agama, Raman Bhatta has given me some pramanas for Sita Devi originating from Bhudevi, and Radha and originating from Neela Devi. Okay, so then other Vaishnava Sampradayas may see it a little bit differently, but he's given me some Pancharatra pramanas for that. So Sri Bhu and Neela are considered the three main consorts of Lord Vishnu. While treating Vishnu as the supreme god, it became necessary to give other gods a due place, and so they're treated as forming a part of his retinue. Okay, so these are called Parivara Devatas, right? The Parivara is like the family or the group around the central deity. Central deity is Sriman Narayana or Vishnu. And the Parivara Devatas are the consorts and attendants and devotees of Vishnu. So the icons or deities so created for the principal deity, particularly Vishnu and his consorts, and some others as well, such as Vishvaksena, right, who is an attendant deity to Vishnu, right, his commander-in-chief of his army, or like his secretary, right. In Shaivite terms, Shiva has a personality, an attendant called Chandakeshwara, right? So he says the same, serving the same principle service as Vishvaksena does for Vishnu. Then we also have like Hanuman, and we have Garuda, and we have Ananta, and right. Then the Vibhava deities, right? So are expansions of the primary form of God, Para, right? The Vibhava deities are also expansions, but here it's mentioning Vishvaksena, Hanuman, the Vibhava deities, and others were required to be only one for each and not more. Okay, so what's he saying here? The deities so created for the principal deity, particularly Vishnu and his consorts, and some others as well, such as Vishvaksena, Hanuman, the Vibhava deities, and others, were required to be only one for each and not more. Okay, I'm not quite sure what his point is there. Anyway, the worship of God can also be done in water, right? So we also know that from the Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 27th chapter, Lord Krishna's instructions to Uddhava on deity worship. And he explains that the Lord can be worshipped in also other forms, like water. So he can be worshipped in water, can be worshipped in a kurcha, which is a bundle of darba grass, right? Used as a seat or used as a temporary deity form that you can invoke a personality to reside within and accept worship in. So the Lord can be worshipped in water, in a kurcha, or in a deity, in a three-dimensional deity, or it could be a two-dimensional yantra or some sort of mandala. The tradition of the Agamas is to treat the first one as low, right? So in water, worship of God in water is considered to be lowest, right? The second one as middling, like in the kurcha, right? And the last one in the deity has to be the best. The icon or deity is called a bearer. So the word for the deity is bearer. In the Agamas, in the Pancharatra Agamas, we'll hear the word bearer. And there are different bearers. We just described before in the temples there would be these six different bearers. The Mula bearer, also called Dhruva bearer, which is the immovable deity, and then we have the Utsava bearer, slightly smaller but can be taken on processions, movable. Then we have Shnapana bearer, which is much smaller, which is used for bathing. We have the Tirtha bearer or Shnapana bearer. We have the Bali bearer who goes around and gives Bali offerings of rice in different directions and for different personalities out of the prasadam that's offered to the Lord. Bali bearer, Homa bearer, Yaga bearer, right? The deity that goes to the Yagashala of the temple and observes the fire rituals which are going on there. Payank bearer, which is in a form so that he can lie down and sleep. So we have all these different types of bearers: Utsava bearer, Bali bearer, Payank bearer, Shnapana bearer, Tirtha bearer. There are basically 6 in all, and usually it comes down to, in modern temples they usually have at least one, or they usually have 2 at least. They have a movable and immovable image. Right. So these are all called bearers, and the word bearer means body. So the Agamas use this word quite often to refer to the deity or the icon. Worship of the Lord in the icon or deity is said to please the eyes, the mind, and the heart. It produces devotion for people in general who worship it. Hari is pleased and becomes accessible to his devotees. And here's a quotation that he's giving from KA. I'm not sure what that is. KA, we have to look up what it is. And we have some other footnotes here. Okay, so then in Vaipurana, we have here this word. The word bearer is interesting. Okay, so let's just look at the footnote here. So the footnote about the word bearer, this word does not occur in the Sanskrit language, but it is found as forming part of other words, right? So for instance, the name Kubera, bearer is part of Kubera, the Lord of Wealth, who is said to have a bad or deformed body. And we can see this quotation from Vayu Purana, right, where it talks about Kubera, from the 70th chapter, 39th verse of Vaya Purana. So some commentators take this word to be derived from the root kumbh, right? Meaning to conceal, with the suffix erach, which is a Paninian suffix. So Kubera is said to conceal his wealth and keep it away from one and all. So we can also see Bhanuji Dikshita on Namalinganusasana. So Namalinganusasana, there was a person called Amara, and he wrote a dictionary called Namalinganusasana, which is a poetic dictionary in different verses. And it's something which people who learn Sanskrit will memorize, and it gives them a lot of vocabulary for reading Sanskrit after they learn the grammatical rules. So Amara's Namalinganusasana is very, very famous in about, I think, 800 verses or something like that. And people have written commentaries on it. So we also should see Vachaspatya on the same, and maybe Sabdakalpa Druma, which also a type of dictionary probably. Right, so this interpretation is not acceptable, is what he's saying. Right, this idea that the word bearer comes from the word kumbh. Right, for it does not explain how the word bearer has come into being. The origin of this word is still mysterious. So the Agamas use the following words, right? Bearer, Archa, Pratima, Bimba, and Murti in the sense of an icon or idol or deity, right? So all of these are interchangeable, except for that normally the word bearer is used in Pancharatra, and Pratima sometimes also means a two-dimensional form, maybe a bas relief sort of a deity in relief, which is almost two dimensionals like that. Okay, that's possible. Bimba also is used in a sense. In philosophy, there's a discussion about bimba, pratibimba. Bimba means a form, pratibimba means a reflection of the form. So bimba is also used. Okay, so all of these are used. All right, so here's some more. Let's go on. So now there are 5 bearers. 5 bearers, according to the Vaikanasa system, are called the Dhruva, Kautika, Snapana, Utsava, and Bali are required in temples. They are to be made out of various materials in specific sizes proportionate to one another. Some authorities hold that so what are these, right? The Dhruva is the mula bearer, or the immovable one. Kautika, Snapana, Utsava, and Bali are movable and used for different purposes. Snapana is obvious. Kautika probably means this Rakshabandhana, a deity that goes for the Utsavas or something like that. But here we have an Utsava as well. So what is the difference between Utsava and Kautika? I don't know. So we'll have to have a look. Snapana obviously for bathing, and Bali for going around and giving Bali offerings of prasadam after the two different Vimana devatas and Prakara devatas and Parivara devatas that are in the temple. So okay, so they are made out of various materials of specific proportions to one another, right? So some authorities hold that the Snapana and the Kautika to be of little importance. By worshipping the Dhruva bearer, or the mula bearer, the main one gets the rewards hereafter. The Utsava bearer gives rewards here itself. Okay, so that quotation comes from KA, whatever KA is, right? We don't know what that scripture is. We have to look it up. Okay. So the Vaikanasa texts seek to clarify the forms of God in a different way also. They are mobile, or chala, or immobile, achala. And that also comes from some other shastra here. Okay, so yep, the former is required to depend upon another, which is taken to be represented by the Kautika bearer. Okay, so the former, the mobile, is taken to depend upon another, which is represented by the Kautika bearer. This is to be served with devotion, upon which devotion sprouts in the devotee. People become prosperous by worshipping this form. The other form is also called Nishkala. It does not depend upon the concrete form. It is represented by the Dhruva bearer, the main deity. This form is mainly intended for the worship of recluses meaning sannyasins or rishis out in the forest. Okay, so the need to have an image, right, which can never be disturbed from its position accounts for the mula bearer and the Dhruva bearer. But the grace of God is not restricted to be received only by the archaka or the devotees who visit the temple. There are persons who may be ill or cannot move out of their homes. For their benefit, an image is required to be taken in procession through the streets. This accounts for another image whose size must be in a prescribed proportion to that of the Dhruva bearer. It is called the Utsava bearer. The occasions for taking this image around the locality must be determined. Hence, certain days or periods in the year are particularized when festivals are celebrated with pomp. Again, there's a need to offer ceremonial bath every day to God. This cannot be done without much inconvenience. So the image called the Shnapana bearer is intended for this purpose. The Dhruva bearer and Utsava bearers have ablutions generally once a week on a fixed day or on specific occasions. So the Dhruva bearer, the main deity, unfixed deity, is worshipped once a week. Like in Tirupati, we have Tirupati Balaji on Fridays. The big deity is the big stone immovable deity is bathed. But on other days of the week, only the smaller Shnapana deity is bathed. So it's like we have in Sri Rangam, we have Jeshta Abhishekam, where the big deity of Lord Ranganatha, Periya Perumal, lying down is bathed. Otherwise, on every Ekadasi and certain days, the Utsava Murti is bathed. The Shnapana bearer is also called the Tirtha bearer. So Tirtha, in this sense, means it can mean Charnamrita, but it means holy water. Right, so it can mean taking a holy dip in a tank, or being bathed with holy water at the time of ritual ablution. So the Shnapana bearer is also called the Tirtha bearer and is taken for immersion in sacred waters of a tank or river or sea, right, when the annual or any other festival concludes. On the occasion called Avabrita. Now, this is from the Shrauta sacrifices from the Vedas, right? At the end of the sacrifice, everybody, the Yajamana and the priest, was supposed to go and take a bath. So similarly, at the end of these Agamic festivals, the priests will go and they will take a bath with the Shnapana bearer, right? And that will mark the end of the Utsava, the annual Utsava, which is the Brahmotsava, and the other Utsavas. An image called the Kautika bearer or Karma bearer is installed for which offerings of flowers, archana, are done daily. So offering of flowers with different names of God, like that. Lastly, it is necessary to have a Bali bearer to be taken round to make offerings at fixed places in the temple. The Vaikanasa kind of worship, as it is now in practice, does not keep the distinction between the Utsava and Kautika bearers. The offerings, archana, are made direct to the mula bearer and the Kautika bearer. So the Pancharatra mode of worship has a Shayana bearer that will be a sixth form, right? Which apparently the Vaikanasa doesn't have. Used to show God as taking rest at night at the end of the routine of daily worship. The Vaikanasa mode permits Shnapana or Bali bearers to be used for this purpose. Okay, so they do have in Vaikanasa the idea of putting they have an icon or a deity that they put to sleep or lay down, but they use instead the Shnapana or Bali bearer, which are smaller movable deities, to do that. They don't have a specific form of the Lord which is specifically for taking rest. Some Pancharatra texts speak of a Tirtha bearer as the sixth icon or deity used on specific occasions. So it's hard to understand how and why the present practice arose of keeping only 4 or 3 bearers in the temples, including the major ones, it is found that one of the bearers, like the Snapana, is used to serve the purposes of another, which has perhaps not made or lost, which was perhaps not made or lost in course of time. There seems to be no strong justification for keeping both the Tirtha and Snapana bearers, as suggested in certain texts. So somehow there's a distinction made between these two in some texts, between the Tirtha and Snapana. Tirtha bearer would be the bearer that the form of the law that goes for the Avabrit Snanam, and the Snapana bearer would be the one that's bathed daily or on special occasions, right? So the difference being that the Tirtha bearer is immersed and the Snapana bearer has liquids poured over it. The reference in the Vishwaksena Samhita to Karma, Nitya, and Tarunalaya is also vague, unless some kind of justification is offered for the keeping of them. There are rules that prescribe the size of each bearer, the metals out of which they are to be made, and the methods and times of worship. Among them, the Dhruva bearer is also called the Mula bearer, as it represents figuratively the root out of which the tree is evolved, in which the Utsava bearer represents the flowers and the other three as leaves. The most significant, the utmost significance is given to the installation of the Dhruva bearer, right? So the installation ceremony or the Pratishta Prayoga for the fixed deity is given much more significance than the installation of the other deities. So there are certain postures like sthiti, asana, and sayana, and others for this. So for instance, the Dhruva bearer or the Mula bearer can be sitting, sthiti, can be, I'm sorry, sthiti, I'm not sure. Okay, sayana means lying, right? Sthiti means standing. Asana means sitting, right? So you have these three postures usually of Vishnu, right? And there are some temples where you see three forms in different parts of the temple, one lying, one standing, one sitting, and others for this. So the specific ornaments and weapons are required to adorn these icons or deities. So they might have different hands, numbers of hands, from 2 to 4 to more than 4, and they might have different weapons or ornaments in those hands, and also ornaments on the deity's body. In the making of these icons or deities, the materials will have to be examined and selected so as to bring prosperity to the maker, the priest, and the people of the locality. Also, artistic form is to be achieved while making the image. God, however, takes the form which the maker or the priest or the devotee eagerly prays God to take up. So the icons or deities are to be installed in specific places with elaborate preparations of materials using the particular mantras enjoined in the Agama text for each deity and for each bearer. So there may be, we are familiar with there being separate, different mantras to go with each form of Vishnu, but also each different bearer, there might be different mantras which are used for the different bearers. So for instance, we have the three Vyapaka mantras, Om Namo Narayanaya, Om Namo Vishnave, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And they might be used for different bearers. So for instance, the Mula bearer might be worshipped with Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, the Utsava bearer might be worshipped with Om Namo Narayanaya, and the Snapana bearer might be worshipped with Om Namo Vishnave, like that. So the kind of grains that are used for preparing the food offerings, the quantity of ingredients, the kinds of flowers to be culled for offerings to God, the materials to be brought for each pitcher or kalasha, kumbha, pot, whose number varies according to the occasions and which are used for ablution or snapana of the icon, and the number of offerings to be made to suit the occasions are all dealt with in these texts. So they're all dealt with in the Pancharatra text, in the Agama text. To house the icons, the sanctum sanctorum, or the inner deity room, is to be built with enclosures that vary of varying number, quadrangles, courtyards, and halls with towers and specified numbers of stories. Rules are laid down differently in different texts for installing the gods who form the retinue of the principal deity in particular enclosures. Worship done to the icon is stated in the Vaikanasa Agama texts to be of two kinds, Shantika and Poshtika, the former bringing about the removal of evils of all people, while the latter is conducive for their welfare. So these two types of worship are mentioned in the Vaikanasa. Shantika, which removes inauspiciousness and removes all evils from the people, because the temple worship is being done for the people in the general vicinity, in the community, while the latter is conducive for their welfare. Poshtika means for their nourishment, for their welfare. Yeah. So worship of God is called yagya. Again, yagya means sacrifice. Yaga means a bigger sacrifice, which suggests that it is Vedic in character. So they use that word, the Agamas use that word to refer to the worship of God, to bring together the idea that the Agamas are also Vedic in character. It is of two kinds, worship in the temple and worship in the home. Okay, so we have worship in the temple, worship in the home using Agamic methods. Worship in the temple is extolled to be the best. It will not stop, even if the priest who performs it passes away. It is conducive for the welfare and prosperity of the people of the locality. This classification is also called Swarta and Parata. So arta means gain, right? Or goal, we can say gain, right? Swarta means for my own gain or my family's gain, or I'm praying only for me and my family, for our benefit. And pararta is the archika or the pujari in the temple is praying for the benefit of others, para arta. The former corresponds to worship done in the house, and the latter is done in the temple. The Vaikanasa text called Vasadikara offers another classification into pure and mixed. The former is that which is done in the house, right, by one who observes all the 40 sacraments prescribed in the Vaikanasa Kalpa Sutras. Okay, so this again is harkening back to the Vedic samskaras. There are 40 Vedic samskaras, not just 16. There are 40. And if anybody wants to know more about that, they can get in touch with me, because we can list, but mostly, except for 16, people don't usually know that there are other Vedic sacraments that are supposed to be done. The former is that which is done in the house by the one who observes the 40 sacraments prescribed in the Vaikanasa Kalpa Sutras. The icon to be worshipped must be installed in the house, and the worshipper must perform homa daily in fire, and he should not perform worship in the temple. Interesting. So a person who is qualified to worship in the house, he's not qualified to worship in the temple, right? The worship done in the temple for others' sake follows strictly the procedure laid down in the Agamas and is of the mixed kind. It's called mixed. So in the house, pure, in the temple, mixed. It is as to whom is qualified to perform worship, there is difference of opinion between Pancharatra and Vaikanasa Agamas. The former, the Pancharatra, prescribes the qualification for all people without distinction of caste and sex. It is based only on two grounds, namely Panchasamskara and specific initiation. So Panchasamskara is a general initiation to purify the body of a particular person, and there are other initiations in the Agamas, right, which are specific initiations in certain aspects of certain Agamas, right, for the worship, specifically in the temple. Panchasamskara will give us the general Pancharatric qualification to worship in the house. One becomes eligible for the latter only after getting qualified by the former, right? So the former, Panchasamskara, is taken up, and then latter, another type of samskara, like for instance with Padma Samhita, the Chakrabja Mandala Diksha for a temple archika. So some of the texts actually mention that women are eligible for initiation. Okay, and so that's it's given here. The Panchasamskara is quite essential to do the service of God, is explicitly conveyed in the Parameshwara Samhita, chapter 15, 959, 973. The kinds of initiation which vary with the individuals is treated in Jayakya Samhita 15.4.6, 16.34 to 61, 17 Parameshwara Samhita 8.10, Ishvara Samhita 21. I guess that's, I'm not sure what that's, Satvata Samhita probably 19, Parameshwara Samhita 4.18, Sijakya Samhita chapter 16, Polshka Samhita 30, 136 to 189, etc. Also, right? Also Vishwamitra Samhita, it says here. So he's given actually a nice verse here which says that women and Sudras also can be initiated. Right. Okay. So up here says eligible for initiation. Okay, so all are qualified only for offering worship in the house, while Brahmins alone are eligible to worship the deity in the temple, right? And the quotation there is taken from Parameshwara Samhita, right? But I would dispute that, because there is actually also a quotation in Ishvara Samhita that says all the castes are open to worship, to perform the installation of the deity. So obviously worship of the installation of the deity in the temple means worship in the temple. So in some texts it is said that only those who are descendants of Kasyapa, Upagayana, Bharadvaja, Monjayana, and Shandilya have the primary qualification, right? While others have the qualification in a secondary sense. Okay, so and that was from Shandilya and other 4 sages who received the Pancharatra training from him have primary authenticity to do worship, and that's from Ishvara Samhita 21.5.11 and Parameshwara Samhita 4, 3b to 4a, and Sri Prashna Samhita 24, 144, 146. Okay, so these are all important pramanas to know these qualifications. According to the Vaikhanasa Agamas, right, only those who by birth belong to the Vaikhanasa Sutra are eligible to worship in temples. Investiture with the sacred thread Upanayanam is the only qualification which only Brahmins can have, right? So the Vaikhanasa Sutra people, right, also believe in the offering of Panchasamskara during the time of Pungsavana Samskara in the mother's pregnancy. They take some payasam or sweet rice infused with mantras of Sudarshana, which the mother drinks, and Panchajanya, and that is considered to be the initiation of the fetus, of the child. So they are called also Garbha Vaishnavas, these Vaikhanasins, because they're already initiated when they're born. So investiture with the sacred thread is the only qualification, and only Brahmins can have. Right, so others are forbidden from having this right, whatever be their caste or sex. If such person touch the idol, even by accident, expiatory rites or prayaschitta have to be performed. The person who is to attend to worship is called acharya in this system. Besides being a follower of the Vaikhanasa Sutra, he must be a householder with a wife and children. Study of the Vedas and training in the performance of Shrauta rites, meaning Vedic rites, and expiatory prayaschitta rites, diligence in discharging his duties, and above all, abiding devotion to Vishnu mark him as competent for the work in the temple. In addition to attending to his work in the temple, he must also offer worship to God in his house. The Pancharatra system prescribes certain qualifications. The person who is to offer worship to God in the temple is here also called acharya, right? So we have acharya or bhattacharya is usually the title of the temple priest. Sometimes that is shortened to bhatta, right? Acharya, Bhattacharya, or Bhatta. He must be competent in the practice of mantras, following the tradition, both in theory and practice. He must be in a position to offer clarifications on the issues raised by pupils without referring to texts. Actuated by selflessness, he offers training and guidance to the pupils. If need be, he gives assistance even to those who are not his students. He never deceives anyone, not even the ignorant. Adequate physical and mental strength is expected in him. He must be only a Brahmin. He must avoid loose talk and lead a virtuous life. He may be a brahmacharin, grihasta, or vanaprastha, but never a sannyasi. He may be a vatu, that is less than 16 years old, a young man, of middle age or old. The Pancharatra Agama speaks only of the qualifications for pupils who are said to be of four kinds, right? So here, this was according to Vaisnavism Agama. Okay, so that's Pancharatra Agama. Okay, all right, that's Pancharatra Agama. Okay, so the Pancharatra Agama speaks also of the qualifications for the pupils who are said to be of four kinds. So that was the qualification of the teacher. Sorry, Samayin, Putrika, Sadhaka, and Acharya. Samayins get merely initiated, but do not learn the doctrines of the system and so are not fit to worship God. So you have to know also the doctrines of the philosophy to actually worship the deity in the temple. Those who become sons, called Putrika, right, as it were, to those who initiate them are of the second kind. Sadhakas are those who understand the nature of the system and become devoted to offer worship to God. And acharyas have the competence to expound the mantras and texts and could conduct the sacraments to other pupils, right? The acharya, who is mentioned here, is a pupil at first and then becomes a preceptor. All these are fit to get initiation. The pupil must have amiable qualities, be able to receive and retain what is taught to him, and live according to the tradition with faith in God. The initiation is open to any caste, and even women are eligible if they get their husband's permission. The process of initiation gets an elaborate treatment. Several tests are to be conducted to find out whether the pupil will remain true to what he is taught. He must have abiding faith in the Sattvata system. The period of test is 1 year, and this is quite normal, right? In Vaishnava literature or Vedic literature, right? That the test of the guru and the test of the disciple takes the period of 1 year. Initiation is called diksha, which word is explained as denoting that which cuts away all miseries and karma and reveals reality in full. It destroys all impurities and brings to the pupil supreme bliss. Initiation is twofold, according to the economic condition of the pupil. A well-to-do candidate gets it done on an elaborate scale. For one who is not well off, homa is done in the fire with seeds of sesame. For a penniless oral instruction is enough. For the penniless oral instruction is enough. Okay, so then no one who makes a request for it may be denied. It's a very important point here, and the pramana for that he's giving as coming from Jayakya Samhita. So nobody can be denied. If they want initiation, they should be initiated because it's open to everybody, right? So no one who makes a request for it may be denied. There is another classification in ordinary or special. Into ordinary or special mantras are merely used in the former kind, which admits of three further subdivisions: condensed, normal, and elaborate. Okay, so mantras, there's another classification into ordinary and special, right? So there's different types of initiation. Mantras, and the mantras are ordinary and special. Mantras are merely used in the former kind, which admit 3 further subdivisions: condensed, normal, and elaborate. So ordinary mantras are divided into condensed, normal, and elaborate. The special kind of mantras are 5-fold. The Samayins, right, which was mentioned, the first kind of initiate, and youngsters whose hearts are set on Vishnu get the first kind. First kind being ordinary mantras, right? Of these special kinds of mantras, the first kind of the 5 kinds. The second is open to maidens and putrikas, so those students who are like sons, and also to young girls, right? Maidens, kanyas. The third kind are prescribed for the sadhaka type of initiation, who wish to obtain moksha. The acharyas must adopt the fourth. The acharyas, or that type of initiate, must adopt the 4th kind to attain sayuja. Women are eligible for the last kind, the 5th kind of mantras, like that. So the initial letter D in Diksha, right, is derived from the root du, which meaning to cut. So there's several different meanings to Diksha we should give in here. Yeah. Diyate siddhaya sarva kshiyante grantayopyata dikshat vamevam dikshaya dharma hridat manaha. Okay, from Vishvaksena Samhita 10.2. And there's some other explanations there. Okay. The pupil must be pure and free from temptations. As samhara nyasa. Samhara means destruction, and nyasa means touching different parts of the student's body, right? Samhara nyasa, right, to destroy evil qualities in the pupil's body, is done by the preceptor on the body of the pupil in order to get rid of the impurities there belonging to prakriti, or material nature. The body then becomes pure when the teacher does shristi nyasa. So after doing samhara nyasa, then the teacher does shristi nyasa. This is the same process as Bhuta Shuddhi, but the teacher is doing it at the time of initiation, Pancharatric initiation. This is followed by sthiti nyasa, when the mantra is taught, which does not leave the pupil on any account. Sthiti means to be fixed, right? So these are the 3 types of nyasa: samhara, shristi, and sthiti. Okay, so then the preceptor does this at first on his body so as to make himself mantramaya. He is trying to do this on his body to make his own body the form of the mantra, and then he does it on the body of the pupil. The mantra is then taught to the pupil, which he is to practice with faith and diligence. To do this, he has to undertake japa, homa, tarpana, abhisheka, and viprabhojana, right? All of these are collectively called purascharana. Purascharana, or purascharya, as it's also called, means we have to do japa of the mantra, and there's a certain number of mantra japas that we have to do. 10 times less than that, we do homa oblations in the fire. 10 times less than that, 10 times less, not 10 oblations less, 10 times less, we do tarpana, or offering of water oblations. Then we have to do abhishekam of the deity, right? Or even the students have to have abhishek done to them, right? Which is also part of the Diksha ceremony. And then viprabhojana, 10 times less than the tarpana, we do viprabhojana. So, for example, if we have to chant the mantra 100,000 times, then we have to do homa 10,000 times, then we have to do tarpana 1,000 times, then we have to feed 100 brahmins, and we have to do abhishekam of the deity, and also of the shishya, of the disciple, right, who's getting the initiation. All these are collectively called purascharana, right? So this is described, and for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, this is described in chapter 17 of Hari Bhakti Vilas, how to get the siddhi, how to get the perfection of a particular mantra. Yet, there is yet another division of initiation, right? So we just talked about some different types of mantras, different types of initiates, right? There's a different type of way of dividing up a different initiations, both gross and subtle and absolute. So gross, subtle, and absolute, 3 types of initiation, right? All of these are called mantra diksha, for which the pupil must have got himself qualified in the practice of mantras. Thereupon, the adept will give an initiation into the principles or tattvas, right? The entire process is highly intricate to understand. The pupil will have to occupy the mandalas, especially the Chakrabja mandala. So I have to learn he'll have to learn, there'll have to be a Chakrabja mandala, a Vahanam and Puja, and he'll have to understand, be taught about the Chakrabja mandala. At the end, he gets the ritualistic ablution, which gets a very elaborate description. And that description is given in Jaka Samhita 18. So continuing on, it is thus found that all are qualified for initiation. In this context, it's worth considering what the word Krita Lakshana means in this in a passage already cited from the Mahabharata. It means those who have the mark. This mark cannot be getting initiated, but something else by which one getting it becomes eligible to do worship of God. This mark may be that which is made on the shoulder blades of the pupil by the teacher with the heated symbols of the conch and discus. It may be the Urdhva Pundra mark on the forehead and other parts of the body, right? Anyway, both these show the wearer of them as a Vaishnava. Ancient texts declare these are as essential for doing worship to God. Some of the later Samhitas mention the sacrament of Panchasamskara as included under initiation, calling it a diksha. Right. So normally amongst Sri Vaishnavas, when we say diksha, we mean what is done so that a person can be a temple priest. And when we say Panchasamskara, we say normal initiation for general initiation for everybody else. Right. Ancient texts, however, do not refer to this. Though it is necessary to qualify a person for worshiping God, it is not initiation, nor can it be considered a qualification for a priest to offer worship in the temple, right? So Panchasamskar is not considered like that. The Acharya is one of 4 kinds of adepts for Diksha, right? As we just discussed, right? He is virtually the director for giving guidance to those who participate in the installation ceremonies. Thus, he is not an ordinary priest. The disciples, assistants, and archakas work under his direction. He must therefore be well versed in the theory and practice of the agamic works, including that relating to the building of temples. The act of worship is conceived in the Agamas as yaga. Yaga means a big sacrifice, right? The Pancharatra has specific rules laid down for this. The Vaikanasa follows the rules laid down in the Vaikanasa Kalpa Sutras. The Chakrabja Mandala, right, which is a mandala made up with a wheel and a lotus in the center, is to be used for the performance of the rituals, which are classified into 7 kinds: Yaga, Stoma, Mahayaga, Advara, Sava, Kratu, and Haristoma. What precedes in this order is of less importance to what follows it, right? So what precedes, so the Yaga is the least important, Haristoma is the most important. Yep. These are to be performed respectively by the Samayan, Dikshita, Chakravartin, Abhishikta, Guru, Acharya, and Bhagavan. Yeah. Different divisions of priests. Right. The Agamas are concerned also with the well-being of the people. This is evidenced from the directions contained in them for laying down the roads in the villages where the temples are to be constructed. The Aparajita Pritcha, Shilpa Ratna, Kashyapa Shilpa Sutra, and Tattva Samuchaya, and many other texts treat, among other topics, temple building with architectural details and other allied topics. However, what they contain do not accord well with the Agamic treatment in all details. The several methods have been utilized by the Agama texts to serve their purposes. They are not actually concerned with the details of construction, material, and measurements. They are interested primarily in maintaining the ritualistic aspect in the building programs. Architectural details are therefore not fully available in the texts. An individual or a group of persons or a rich landlord or a king is referred to as a yajamana or bhakta, right? Meaning a sponsor. Yajamana means the sponsor, and a bhakta means a devotee. If he takes the initiative by providing the means for building a temple, anyone cannot become a yajamana, right, or sponsor. Under the direction artisans have to work. They are referred to by the words of ratakara. Ratakara means the maker of a rata or a chariot, right? Shilpin, right, usually refers to a person who carves the deity. Stapati, also a person who makes the vigrahas or makes the deities, either stone or either stone or either stone or metal, right? And takshaka. Among them, the shilpin works as a liaison agent between the director and the acharya and the yajamana. The qualifications of these are stated in the texts like Shilparatna. Mantras play a significant role in the agamas. A mantra is a sound with which one associates oneself in the belief that it would protect him. It protects from all dangers one who knows its secret. Since the mantra emanates from sound and sound arises from Brahman, the mantra should denote God alone. The pupil who receives the mantra from the preceptor should practice the ritual performance called Purascharana, which we described before. So this is to be done on the bank of a great river, or in a temple, or in a forest, or in a place which is out of public sight. Full effects cannot be achieved unless the aspirant repeats the mantra a specific number of times, right? So normally this Puraschara, the acharya will give, he'll give an explanation of how to do Purascharana for a particular mantra. There are many kinds of mantras. For instance, Taraka is a mantra that saves the devotee from worldly suffering, right? So we can say there's a Rama Taraka mantra, Sri Rama Jaya Jaya Rama. We can even say Hare Krishna Maha mantra is a Taraka mantra because it saves people from worldly suffering. Anyway, it is with reference to a male deity. It is, but it is called Tarika when it refers to a female deity, right? So just a change in the gender there. There are others called Anuttara, Anuttarika, right? And we have some others, Anga and Upanga. So these are different types of mantras. Pranava, Vyahritis, Gayatri, Tara or Tarika, Anuttara or Anuttarika are held to be 5 Vaishnava mantras. There are 5 different types of Vaishnava mantras. Okay, so the Pancharatra Agama adopts Vedic and Tantric mantras. The Vaikhanasa enjoins the use of those taken from the Vedas only. So that'd be the difference between Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa. The names of deities which with appropriate epithets are also used during worship. These are also treated at times as mantras. So sometimes we take the name of the deity, we put it in the dative case, and we add Namaha or Swaha at the end, depending on what we're doing. And we might prefix that with some sort of bija mantra or omkar. Mantras are classified as Somya, Agneya, and Somyagneya. The letters which constitute them have their own presiding deities. Okay, so each mantra also, the letters of the mantra have presiding deities of the letters. Another way of classifying them is Vaidika Tantrika and Vaidika Tantrika. The second kind is meant for those who get initiated according to the Pancharatric system, that is the Tantrika mantras. Specific mantras are enjoined with reference to various deities. The ground or site where the temple is to be erected requires to be tested for the color of the mud and the availability of water. Some offerings are to be made before this selection is made. The procession is also required to be held according to some texts. The Vastu Purusha, right, which is normally the deity that is worshipped when there are new constructions, right, is also to be propitiated. Plans for the formation of villages are found in the Agamas. The village or town should be of the prototype should be the prototype of the temple. Preliminary ceremonies called Garbha are to be observed at the site. The Garbha is usually performed underneath the place where the sanctum sanctorum or the deity room is going to be in the temple, like that, but before the temple is made, right? Also, some people, what they do is they create a small temple, like a model of the temple, and open it and install a small deity to go in that. That's called a balalaya. He hasn't mentioned that here. The temple of Vishnu must be erected at the center of the locality. Other deities should have their due place. So in the different, around on the Vimana, on the Gopuras, in the different prakaras surrounding the temple, there might be in different places, different deities according to the scripture. So other deities should have their due place. Yes, the qualifications of the archakas, right, are stated, and the provision is to be made for their residence, right? So the archakas also have to have a place when you make a temple. The ground is to be plowed, and the seeds are to be sown to test from their sproutings the quality of the soil. Mantras are to be recited as enjoined. Images of some deities are to be placed in some fixed places as enjoined in the Agama texts. The structure of the temples must vary according to the capacity of the yajamana, meaning the sponsor for building the temple. The temple built by a rich man must be larger than when compared to that built of a person of middle income. The structure should be such as to display the 6 paths, or sad advana, through the different portions, right? So exactly what that's about, we have to look at we have to look down here at Poshkara Samhita and Satvara Samhita and the quotations. The number of enclosures are to be 5. So normally there are different 5 prakaras, but there can be up to 7 prakaras, like in Sri Rangam. While the Sri Prashna and Vimana Archana Kalpa, the Sri Prashna Samhita is a Pancharatric Samhita, the Vimana Archana Kalpa is a Vaikhanasa Samhita, mentions 7 prakaras, or 7 enclosures. The Naradiya mentions only 3, the Naradiya Samhita. The corners of the ramparts must have on them the image of a lion or Garuda, right? So normally we can see if the corners of the prakara walls surrounding a temple have Garuda on them, right? Then normally we think that is a Vishnu temple. If they have Nandi on them, we think it's a Shiva temple. If they have a lion on them, then usually it's a Devi temple, right? So the various mandapas are required to be constructed, such as the Astana mandapa, right? Kitchen, which is also called Matapali in Tamil, right? Temple kitchen, right? Clothes store, Dhanalaya, which is a granary for keeping paddy, Yaga Mandapa, which is the place where the Nitya Homa is done, fire sacrifice inside the temple, Kalyana Mandapa, where the Utsava Murtis are brought and married, right? And so on. The specific directions are given for keeping the retinue of God inside certain enclosures. Regarding towers, some texts declare that each enclosure should have a tower in each direction. So when you have these walls surrounding, the prakara wall surrounding a temple of Vaikhanasa or Pancharatra Agamic temple, in the walls, in the cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, in the middle of the walls, there'll be openings to go through, and above the openings will be gopurams or towers. The doors should be, so regarding towers, some texts declare that each enclosure should have a tower in each direction. Some speak of the height of the towers. The doors should be should, besides offering security, be beautiful and symmetrical. They must have the painted figures of gods. The temple that is constructed is taken to represent the body of a man. The sanctum sanctorum represents the head, the Sukhanasi, which is next to it, is the neck. The Ardha Mandapa represents the chest and shoulders. The Prakaras, right, the thighs and knees, and the tower, the feet, right? The significance lies in God's dwelling in the devotee, right? So the temple itself is considered like the body of a person, and the deity is like the soul. The parts of the Vimana, right, which is the tower above the deity, such as the Adhisthana, Pada Prastara, and others, refer to the limbs of God, who is enshrined in the Sanctum Sanctorum. Garbhagriha, Ardha Mandapa, Mahamandapa, Snana Mandapa, Alankara Mandapa, and Sabha Mandapa represent the Muladhara, Swadhisthana, and other chakras within the body, right? So there's this understanding of the different energy centers in the body called chakras. The 7 prakaras, right, which we talked about before, either 3, 5, or 7 prakaras, right, represent the 7 prakaras represent the 7 constituents or dhatus, fluid or blood, blood, flesh, marrow, bone, sinew, and virile fluid, or matter, or also matter, intelligence, intellect, ego, matter, intellect, ego, subtle elements, organs of sense, and elements. Could be organs of sense and organs of work, right? The 5 prakaras may refer to the 5 sheaths, namely, which are known from Taittiriya Upanishad as Ana, Prana, Mana, Vijnana, and Ananda. So in Taittiriya Upanishad, we have Annamaya Kosh, Pranamaya Kosh, Manamaya Kosh, Vijnanamaya Kosh, and Anandamaya Kosh, right? These are the 5 sheaths, right? The 3 prakaras represent the self, matter, and body. The Dwajastamba, which is the flagpole, right, is the pillar of Dharma, It represents the Brahmanadi with Ida and Pingala on both sides. So Brahmanadi would be the Shushumna, which is the nerve that goes up the back of the spine, and the Ida is on the left-hand side, the Pingala is on the right-hand side. Those two start out at the base of the spine, the Muladhara, and cross over at the chakra points. So installation of the idols is to be carried out after the temple is constructed. So first of all, you build a temple, then you install the deities. It is explained that through this, God remains there to shower his favors to his devotees. It is of 5 kinds, either yielding different, each yielding different results, right? So we're talking about the installation now, 5 types, yielding different results. The number of deities or icons, right, to be installed is generally 5. The Vaikhanasa names these as Dhruva, Kotika, Utsava, Bali, and Snapana. The Pancharatra lists 5 or 6 icons or deities: Dhruva, Utsava, Bali, Tirtha, Sayana, with Snapana sometimes making the 6th. Sometimes they are known by other names: Mula, Karma, Nitya, Mahotsava, Snapana, and Tarunalaya. The icons are said to be of 3 kinds, according to their postures: standing, reclining, or sitting, in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd stories, respectively. So if the temple, so in the first story, like on the ground floor, right, we have the standing deity. The next floor up, we could have the reclining deity, and the 3rd floor up, we could have the sitting deity. So there are temples like this in Tirukotiur, right? Or it's also called Tirukostiur, right? Madurai. In Madurai, I've seen that temple. It's called the Kodalalagar temple, not the Alagar Koil temple, but the Kodalalagar temple in Madurai. The Uttiramchur, in Uttaramchur and Parameshwara Vinagaram at Kanchipuram. So there are these different temples that have all 3 types of mula bearers or dhruva bearers. So for the installation ceremony, a hall is to be built for performing homa. That is called a yagashala. The sacred fires vary according to the deities to be installed. So here are some of the sacred fires. Ahavaniya, Avaharya, that should Avaharya, Garhapatya, Avasatya, and Sabda are the 5 fires according to the Vaikanasa. And according to the Pancharatra, it mentions 8 fires. Ahavaniya Dakshinagni, right? Garhapatya Upasana, Sabya, Kavyada, Vaidyuta, and Bhadaba. The mantras are prescribed for doing particular homas to individual deities. The icons are to be kept immersed in water or milk or panchagavya or lying on a costly bed. This process is called adivasa. So we're talking here about cyanadivasa, or when they're underwater or immersed, they are going to be called jaladivasa. In the meanwhile, God's presence is invoked in pots or jars filled with consecrated water. The icons are taken out and carried behind the archakas, who go in advance bearing the jars of consecrated water to the inner shrine where the dhruva bearer is already stationed. The icons are kept in the places assigned to them. They're all sprinkled with the waters, beginning with the dhruva bearer, which becomes veritably God himself. Nyasa is then done on the other deities, differently for each, and the process is repeated. The other icons get consecrated with the power of the dhruva or mula bearer. During this ceremony, the 4 Vyuha deities of the Pancharatra, or the 4 deities or 5 Viras of the Vaikanasa, and all deities forming the retinue of God are also installed in fixed places and homa offered to them. The installation of the 5 deities is elaborately treated. The dhruva bearer must be black in color. It is said that this color is the original one and is the source of all other colors. The Utsava idol or deity and the Bali bearer must not be made of stone or wood. There are rules which enjoin the measurements of the pedestal and the figure of each bearer in proportion to one another, and in proportion to that of the dhruva bearer. The dhruva bearer may have 3 postures: standing, stanaka, sitting asana, and lying, shayana. The Utsava bearer must normally be standing posture, and rarely it is in sitting posture, irrespective of the posture of the dhruva bearer. The Vaikanasa texts classify the deities into 4 kinds: yoga, vira, bhima, abhicharika, and lay down their postures and the weapons that they should hold. As a general principle, the icons of their temples have Shankha Chakra in the 2 hands, the left hand in Katihasta pose, and the right hand in Varada Mudra, offering boons. This is in the case so Katihasta means, Kati means the waist, Hasta means when you put your hand on your waist like that, and then the other one is the Varada mood, where the palm is like this with the fingers pointing down, as with Srinivasa Perumal, the Lord Venkateshwara Balaji in Tirumala Hills, right? In some temples adopting the same agama, the right hand is in abhaya pose, right? So the right hand being with the fingers up, granting security. And in some others, the club adorns the right hand, right? So it's possible that the club is there. The club is to be a weapon only in the case of a posture and is not reckoned as a general one. The club is indispensable for an idol according to the Pancharatra, and the Abhaya Hastam is equally essential. So it is, but in some temples of the Pancharatra, the club is absent and the figure is identical to that in the Vaikanasa temples. It seems that the mode of worship should have changed from Pancharatra to Vaikanasa, or vice versa, during the 17th century, when the icons were removed to places of safety to save them from the Muslim forces which attacked South India. So this is quite common that when the deities when the movable deities are taken to safety during these times, then again when it was reestablished, the worship was reestablished, it changed sometimes between Vaikanasa and Pancharatra, or vice versa. The Pancharatra Agama attaches importance to the Vyuha concept and speaks of the installation of these deities. 5 murtis and viras are required to be installed according to the Vaikhanasa Agama. However, they do not appear to have been installed as such in the temples, nor are they found to receive daily worship. Besides, both the Agamas enjoin the installation of the Vibhava forms of God, but there also only some get represented, such as Narasimha, Rama, and Krishna, in temples where the principal deities are other than these. The Vaikhanasa Agama, in particular, enjoins the installation of Matsya Kurma avatars in villages, the seashore, forests, and hills. There must be no Kautika image for the Dhruva bearer of these. Some Vibhava forms are of more than one type. Varaha is of 3 kinds. Adi Varaha, who rescued the earth from the nether regions, and whose face only should be that of a boar, as in the Sri Mushnam near Chidambaram, which is a self-manifest deity. So the second is Pralaya Varaha, who saved the people at the time of the cosmic deluge. And then the third, Yagya Varaha, who killed the demon Hiranyaksha, right, who had been destroying sacrifices or yagyas. Girija and Stanuja are the 2 forms of Narasimha. The former represents God's descent to the earth on the representations of the gods about their sufferings at the hands of the demon Hiranyakashipu. After killing the demon, he stayed in the forests on the hills. His wrath was appeased by the prayer of the gods. Stanuja is Narasimha as he bursts out from the pillar to attack the demon. Sometimes 3 more kinds are mentioned. Sudarshana Narasimha is seated in the discus, and also holding the discus in each of his 4 hands. So you normally see these Sudarshana deities. On the back side is a seated in yoga position Narasimha with 4 hands with 4 chakras. This is called Sudarshana Narasimha. Lakshmi Narasimha has Lakshmi seated on his lap, and Patala Narasimha is seated on Garuda. There is one reference to a form seated on Adishesha and known as Yanaka Narasimha. Trivikrama has 3 forms. In one, he has 8 arms with the left foot raised to the height of the head. In another, the left foot is raised to the height of the navel. In a third form, he shows the left foot raised to the height of the forehead. Krishna also has many forms. Navanitanata, dancing with butter in his hands. Parthasarthi, the chariot of Arjuna. Kaliya Mardana, killing the venomous serpent Kaliya. He is also known with 4 arms. The icon of Vasudeva may be of 2 kinds, divine, Divya, and human, Manusha. The former has 4 arms, right? The Divya of the Vaikhanasa kind, while the latter has 2 hands, right? After installation, worship is to be done to the deities every day at regular intervals. The Archaka should attend, right? So these are the different intervals, right? Are mentioned there. From Sri Prashna Samhita, it says morning, noon, evening, twilight. Ardha Ratra means in the middle of the night. Are the 6 divisions of day when the worship is offered in the temples. In some shrines, there may be only thrice or twice or even only once worship is offered. Okay, so what we're saying is the Archaka should attend to morning duties, which include Sandhya and Homa. After wearing his Udva Pundram, Tilak, he must approach the guardians of the gates, bow to them, take their permission, and enter the shrine. After prostration, he must seek permission to worship God with the Aupacharika, Samsparshika, and Abhyavaharika materials he has procured. Okay, those will need explanation. Right. One must then undertake Buddha Shuddhi, purification of his material body. Through this process, the gross body will be burned up by vital airs. He will then feel himself to have been flooded by the water issuing forth from the big toe of God, right? So it should be the left toe, I think, right, depending on the meditation. Then he is to create a new body for himself out of pure sattva by uttering the Panchopanishad mantras, which are common. Everybody knows those. Okay, so with the pure body, he must meditate upon Kurma, the earth, the milky ocean, and others, right, which represent the powers that support the universe. He is to build a boundary around himself with the Kavacha mantra. Kavacha means a shield mantra. And then doing Anganyasa and Karanyasa on his body and his hands, right? The mantras which he utters while doing this make him purified and enable him to feel at one with God. Then he is to worship God mentally, which is called Antaryaga or Manasika Yaga and Hridyaga. The object of meditation must be Lakshmi Narayana adorned with conch, discus, and club. The offerings must be made with the materials procured mentally. The Purusha Shukta, Pranava, Omkara, Sadakshara means Om Namo Vishnave, Astakshara, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and Dwadasakshara, Om Namo Om Namo Narayanaya as the Astakshara, and Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Dwadasakshara, should be recited during worship. Homa is to be performed in the fire of the triangular form of the fire altar, which is kindled by the fire of his sentience. The procedure is done as in external worship. The external form of worship is to be undertaken after arranging for the vessels, materials, and other prerequisites. Vaidika and Tantrika mantras, mandalas, etc., according to the Agamas, are required to be made use of here. Vinayaka, right, otherwise known as Ganapati or Ganesh, is to be worshipped at the outset. So that also could be Vishvaksena. There are 6 stages which mark this mode of worship, namely Mantrasana, Snanasana, Alankarasana, Bhojasana, Mantrasana, and Pariyankasana. So that's typical for Tiruvaradanam, right, the system of Tiruvaradanam, or otherwise known as Ija in the house. At the first stage, one has to offer oneself and one's belongings to God. During the second stage, dance, music, and recitation of mantras have to be performed during the holy bath given to the icon. Sandal paste, flowers, and other offerings are to be made during this stage. Incense has to be burned and offered to God. Apart from dance and music, auspicious songs must be sung. In this context, it is said to be noted that the present-day practice of offering mantra pushpa is based on this mandate in the Agamas. The offering, according to the current usage, includes the recitation of the initial mantras of the 4 Vedas, right? So this is similar to Brahma Yajna, so Agnimi, Ile, Purohitam, etc., to be followed by Upanishadic passages glorifying Narayana and the Astakshara mantra, right? So Om Ityaksharam Brahmitine Akshare Narayana Iti Panchaksharani, etc. Right? Passages are then recited from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Vishnu Purana, and other sacred texts. Portion from selected stanzas of the Nalayir Divya Prabandham and the Stotra Ratna of Yamuna and other acharyas are then to be recited. This is all called Shatamurai, right? The Vaikhanasa texts do not enjoin the recitation of the Nalayir Divya Prabandham, right? But the Pancharatra works refer to the singing of passages composed in Bhasha, meaning non-Sanskrit languages, meaning Tamil. Some texts actually refer to the Alvars compositions which are to be sung. That means in the Pancharatra. 2 features are worth noting in this context. One is that the Agama texts do not speak of the recitation of the Vedic passages on this occasion. In all probability, during the period after Yamuna and perhaps Brahmanuja too, the system should have evolved so as to give due place to all passages which are held to be eulogistic or stuti of God. Commencing from the Vedas, these include the Tamil Prabandhas and also the stotras of Yamuna and other acharyas. Another feature that is striking is that the Agamas state that the Archaka must recite many mantras during worship, which include the Purusha Shuktam and Jitante Stotram. Remember we talked about Jitante Stotram, right? There's 6 verses and it starts Jitante Punari Kakshana Masti Vishvabhana. The practice which obtains now is the recitation of all these by others as well who are qualified and trained for it. This practice is also to be noted during Snanam or Shnapanam, bathing of the deity, when not only the Purusha Sukta and Upanishads, but also passages from the compositions of Periyalwa Vishnuchitta, Andal's father, foster father, are recited by those who are assembled in the temple, right? So they also can be in the temple, Koil Tiruvandari, right? So now we have such a practice could be taken to have been introduced about 1000 AD or even later into during the period of Ramanuja. It is worth noting that here that the Nitya Grantha of Ramanuja and that of Sri Ranga Narayana Arya, right, do not make specific mention of this practice. This stage is followed by Bhojasana, in which food preparations are to be offered. These are called havis and are to be sanctified by the Astra mantra. So the Astra mantra, Mahastraya Pat or Viryastraya Pat, right? Or Om Sahasrarahum Pat, Surabhi Mudra, which is the Denu Mudra, right, must be shown. And then the havis or the bhoga has to be offered to God. To compensate any lapse in the offerings, matra, a special preparation made of rice, is to be offered. Mantrasana then reoccurs again when fruits and betel nuts and tambulam, right, sweet spices, right, are offered to the Lord. The Lord is also to be adored with dance and music. Here again, the practice, not mentioned in the Agamas, has come into vogue in temples. A few passages from the composition of Goda, Andal, and Vishnuchitta Periyalwar are sung by way of prayer for continued service of this kind, and as Mangala Shashana, means a type of benediction at the end of a ritual, a sort of benediction for the Lord's glory to continue forever. This is called Satamurai, right? So this is followed by a few Sanskrit passages glorifying the pattern of worship enjoined by Ramanuja. So here we say the Nitya of Ramanuja and the Aradhana Karika of Vangi Puratu Nambi prescribe the procedure for offering worship. The Vaishnava tradition is primarily based on the work of Ramanuja. The idea of Mangala Shashana is derived from the earnestness of devotees to greet the Lord and hail his auspiciousness, thus wishing for a continued availability of that vision and presence of the Lord. This seems to derive from a prayer of the same import addressed to Rudra. Okay, so I don't know about the prayer to Rudra, but it does come from, understood from the prayer, the Tirupalanda prayer of Periyalwar, Palanda, Palanda, Palaya, Ritanda, etc., where he praises the Lord and says, let him live 1,000 years. So a prayer is then offered for the glory of the holy Sri Rangam to prosper and grow. This is followed by singing the Vali Tirunamam, right, which means greetings for the recital of the holy name of an acharya, and praying that he could continue for centuries. The followers of the Vadagalai school of Vaishnavas, the northern school or Kanchi school, sing in this context the Vali Tirunamam of Vedanta Deshika, and those of the Tengalai or southern Sri Rangam school, that of Manavala Mahamuni. These practices are all later developments brought in under the influence of the Tamil hymns of the Alwars. The Archakas have no part to play here. The last part of the puja, of the 6 asanas or the 6 parts of the Tiruvaradhanam, is called the Paryankasanam, which consists of offering a bed to God so he could take rest. The garlands and ornaments are removed lest they cause inconvenience to him while he's lying and sleeping. These 6 stages mentioned above together constitute the daily procedure for worship. In a temple where there is more than one icon or deity, these stages are to be taken to represent the worship offered to all the icons jointly. Where there are 2 icons under the name Snanabera and Tirthabera, the former alone get the stage of Snanasana, right? So for the Snanabera, right, this is what I said, the Shnapanabera or the Snanabera gets the daily bathing, like that. The Tirthabera is for the Avabrit Snan at the end of a Utsava. The Dhruva and Utsava bearers get it on fixed days of the week or on the occasions like Ekadasi, Shravana, Dwadasi, Amavasya, which is the new moon night, and others. even here, the Utsava bearer gets it not always in the sanctum sanctorum, but in a specified place outside it. Similarly, the Alankarasana may also be outside the inner shrine at different places according to the occasion. Normally, the Bhojasana, or offering of Naivedya, right, is offered twice, once in the noon and again early in the night. The second Mantrasana is twice a day, once in the noon and later in the night, following the Bhojasana. The Alankarasana marks the last stage only in the night when the Shaina bearer receives worship. The 6 stages have therefore to be looked upon as marking the acts of worship offered to all the deities, all the icons, jointly on ordinary days, with slight variations on the occasion as the occasion demands when the Utsava bearer receives some of them. So during all the stages, certain kinds of offerings like Argya Patya Achamaniya are to be offered, and Dupa Deepa, right, in the second and third. The Deepa is also offered in the last 2 stages. The act of worship is to be undertaken at all stages with the use of the bell, which is stated to be in the form of Sabda Brahman. The Vaikanasa text prescribed the method of worship on almost the same lines with some changes. A brahmacharian or grihastha is permitted to attend to the act of worship. That's in Vaikanasa. Usually we find that only the grihasthas are supposed to do puja for the Pancharatra. Worship of God is taken to be of 2 kinds. We're talking about Vaikanasa here. One of which relates to God as formless, nirakara, and the other to God as having a form. Worship is offered to God on the ground as in Homa when no form is visualized, but his presence is also invoked on the kushagrass seat, on a kushagrass seat. Formlessness also characterizes his worship in water or otherwise in a pot, in the heart, and in the sun's disk. The 5 fires are to be used for doing Homa when the 5 bearers are to be worshipped, and 3 fires, Treta Agni, for the Dhruva, Bali, and Utsava bearers. After performing Sandhya, Brahma Yajna, and Homa in the fire, he is to commence the worship of God. He must clear off from the person of God the garlands offered the day before and then start his work. So this is taking away the Nirmalya Prasadam from the deity. 4 stages of worship are alone stated explicitly, namely Snanasana, Alankarasana, Mantrasana, and Bhojasana. So this is in Vaikanasa. Worship is to be offered in the morning, noon, and night. No bath is to be offered in the night. The offerings that are made to God are classified as 4 kinds: Sprisha, Drishya, Shravya, and Bhoja. The number of personal services that are given or upacharas are 64, 55, 48, 42, 36, 34, 29, and 27, which are said to be of 9 kinds. In another context, they're said to be 9. The use of a curtain is recommended while offering the daily worship so as to keep off those who would revile the Vedas, heretics, or degraded persons. After all the stages are completed, or the second mantrasana is over, the archaka must prostrate himself before God. This prostration is of different kinds. The Astanga variety is described in the Pancharatra, where you lay out flat like a stick on the floor, otherwise known as Dandavat Pranam. The mastiksa, samputa, prahavanga, hanshanga, and dandanga are different kinds of prostrations according to the Vaikanasa system. Sudarshana as a separate installation with specific mantras. The chakra is the name given to the deity in the Vaikanasa system. The Pancharatra system attaches much importance to this deity, who has a specific yantra for the preparation of which the Aryabhunya Samhita prescribes the rules. The yantra may be written on birch bark also. Like Vishnu, Sudarshana too has his own retinue. Satari is the name given to the sandals of God fixed to a pedestal, which is placed on the heads of devotees while they visit the shrine and offer their prayers to God. It is quite possible that this was instituted in the temples of Vishnu after the Tamil Prabandhas were given importance. Shatakopa, also known as Namalwar, is the super prapana for all Vaishnavas, and it is felt that a Vaishnava must consider himself to be extremely blessed to have the cetari placed on his head by the Archaka, inasmuch as Shatakopan himself is known as cetari. Some of the Agamas refer to the installation of cetari, calling it by the name Paduka Pratishta. Paduka means shoes of the Lord, sandals. So, in some Agama texts, the Alwars and Acharyas are allowed installation under the name Bhakta Bimba, right? So remember, Bimba was a name for the bearer. So Bhakta Bimba is a deity of Acharyas or Alwars, right? Of personnel, human beings, right? So specific rules are prescribed to give them the forms appropriate to their birth and install them in particular places like the prakara, right? The outer quadrangle or separate shrines. After the daily worship is over, evidently in the morning, the Archaka is to perform japa of some important mantras using beads for counting the number of times of repeating them. Useful information is given on the question of selecting the beads. The flowers, fruits, and food offered to God are stated to be unsuited for partaking by devotees. Nirmalya is the name given to them, right? So Nirmalya Uchista means leftovers, right? Remnants, right? The Agamas declare that these become defective by offering them to Vishvaksena. This defect is removed by distributing it before offering them to Vishvaksena. Okay, so some portion of the food which is offered to the Lord is taken out and offered to Vishvaksena, and then the rest of it is offered to others, right, as prasadam. Regarding the food preparations, there are 9 kinds broadly classified as Uttama, Madhyama, and Adama, each one of the 3 subdivisions of the same kind: the economic status of those who administer the temple, nature of the temple as Swayam Vyakta or self-manifest deity, and the like, and the occasion, all determine the nature of the food to be prepared and offered to the deity. Right. So of these 9 kinds, some are necessarily to be offered, and they have no substitutes of a lower kind. Another classification gives 6 kinds of pure cooked rice. Other dishes add mixture of these, separate keeping of these, roots and fruits. So in order to obtain specific objectives, Sudarshana is to be propitiated. The procedure is given differently for kings who seek to gain victory over regions in particular directions. Special worship is required to be undertaken on occasions which the Agamas enjoin. Dwadasi, Amavasya, Purnima, Shravana star, right? Avatara Dina. Avatara Dina means the day of the descent of the particular deity, like Ramanavami, Krishna Jayanti, Vamana Dwadasi, Vraha Dwadasi, like this. The day when the deity made his manifestation, the day on which the lunar asterism of the Yajamana falls. So also the Yajamana, or the person who's the sponsor who made the temple and installed the deity, that person, right? His lunar asterism of his birth, right? The Chaitra and Tula Vishu, right? Uttarayana and Dakshinayana, when the sun goes from the northern to the southern course, or vice versa. The Sankrantis, which are the days when the sun enters into the different divisions of the zodiac, are held to be specific occasions when worship of particular kinds are offered to God. If the asterisms and titis occupy 10 nadikas, okay, a nadika is, again, nadika is like a muhurta, right? Or maybe half a muhurta, right? We have to look it up, right? On the next day, if the asterism titi occupy 10 nadikas on the next day, right, after sunrise, that day must be chosen for this worship, and not the one when the asterism or titi is not available at sunrise. Yeah. Okay. So only if the titi or the asterism is available at sunrise on the particular place, right? And it has to be 10 nadikas on the next day. right, on that day. This worship must be undertaken on that day when the titi is only for a very small part, as in the case of Ekadasi, Amavasya, and Dwadasi. The Vaikanasa text speaks of the Shravana, right, meaning Shravana Nakshatra, 2 Dwadasis, Purnima, and Amavasya as Vishnu dinas, as special days when special kinds of worship are required to be offered. However, the practice obtaining in most Vishnu temples is generally to treat the monthly Sankranti, when the sun goes into the next asterism, into the next month, solar month, right? 2 Ekadasis, Amavasya, Purnima, Shravana Nakshatra, right? Because Shravana is the birth nakshatra, or supposed to be the star of Vishnu, and the asterism under which God manifests himself in the particular shrine. So, for example, for Krishna, Rohini Nakshatra. For Narasimha, it can be Ardra. Is it Ardra Nakshatra? Yeah. Ardra, or sorry, Swati Nakshatra, excuse me. Right, etc. In the particular shrine, special worship, which includes Shnapana and procession in the streets of the Utsava deity. The Utsava icon of Lakshmi is taken in procession within the temple every Friday, inside the temple, except in Sri Rangam when she doesn't come out from her shrine like that. So there's some variation between different temples. Sri Jayanti, Sri Ramanavami, Kritika Deepa, when there's a big light, which is a fire which is burned in Kritika Deepa. Deepawali, which is modern Diwali festival, right? And some other festivals peculiar to certain places like Gangavatarana and Parinetam Peruku, the flood of the 18th day, which represents the celebration of the floods in the Kaveri in July and August, are given special significance. Kaishika Dwadasi requires to be celebrated by having music sung in the Kaishika tune. So there was a particular raga or tune for Kaishika Purana, which is recited on that day. On this day, which falls in November, December, the Kaishika Puranam is read in temples. Any festival that is conducted annually or periodically in temples is called an utsava. There are at least 3 ways in which the significance of this word is brought out. The utsava is so called because it gives rise to delight, and God is very much delighted by it. The number of days becomes 5 if Purnima and 1 Ekadasi are left out. Of Shravana is to be left out, or Shravana is to be left out. Otherwise, the number becomes 7. If Purnima is left out, the number becomes 6. So yet the name Pancha-parva is used though without sufficient justification, or taking Amavasya and Purnima as one and 2 Ekadasis as one, the name can be justified. So there's a name for these special days which are to be honored. Okay, so the second explanation shows of the word utsava, right? Of the second explanation of the word utsava shows that it is called by that name because it is prominent when compared to other occasions. The third explanation takes the word sava in the sense of misery. So the festival is called utsava since misery is removed by it. Utsava, right? To take out the misery. Right. So whatever be the explanation, that utsava provides the people of the locality with an occasion for spending their time with delight, forgetting their wanted discomforts and sufferings, is very evident wherever the annual festivals of God are conducted. The Vaikanasa Agama classifies the utsava under 3 kinds: Kalotsava, Shradotsava, and Naimitikotsava. The first mentioned festival is conducted at specific occasions. Kalotva, Kala means time, Utsava means festival. So the specifically timed Utsavas. The second, or the Shradotsava, is taken up by an individual who gets inspired by faith, Shraddha, and arranges for conducting it. The last one, or the Naimitikotsava, requires the occasion like a famine or a drought, or an occasion requiring the propitiation of God. Just like when I was living many years ago in the 80s, in Melkote for 6 months doing microfilming there there was a drought for many years. So what they instituted was everybody morning and evening would walk from the temple to the tank, and then back from the tank to the temple in the evening. And both times we would chant Vishnu Sahasranama. And after a few days or a week or so, we got rains. Okay, so this is an idea for a Naimittikotsava. The most important festival is to be conducted at least once a year. In some temples, it's conducted more than once a year. There is no unanimity on the number of days during which the festival should be gone through. The number is stated to be 15, 13, 11, 9, 7, 5, 3, 2, and 1 in descending order. The first one being treated, the first one being treated as the best. In other words, the 15-day festival. According to some, the number in this order is 9, 7, and 1. Still others give 21, 14, and 9 and 7, or 9 and 7 as in the same order. The festival is called Mahotsava, or the huge festival, and not Brahmotsava, as it is now called, right? The fixing of the period or date for undertaking this is based on several factors. The entire festival is treated as a sacrifice, at the conclusion of which the participants bathe in the tank or river or sea. This bath is called Avabrita, which we mentioned before, which also is the mark of the conclusion of the festival. The festival is to commence on a day so as to have the Avabrita, Snana, bath, on the day of Vishu, right, with a particular star, Ayana, the birthday of the king, the birthday of the Acharya who conducts the installation, right, occurrence of an eclipse, monthly asterism, which may mean the day having the asterism when God made his manifestation, or the 5 days belonging to Vishnu, which were mentioned before. The festivals conducted at present are arranged to have Avabrita on one of the days mentioned here. In most of the prominent temples, the conclusion on the 9th day is the day of Shravana, the Shravana star. The festival is conducted normally for 9 days, and duration of more than this number is rare. It is also held that each day the festival has a presiding deity. Elaborate preparations are to be made for conducting the festival. Collection of sacred mud, mritsangraharana, and sowing of seeds of various grains, ankurapanam, form the preliminary rites for the conduct of any festival. Dwaja arohanam, or hoisting the flag, right, temple flag, and Dwaja avarohanam, or pulling down the flag, right, taking down the flag, are the two chief items of the festival. These former mark the commencement and the latter the conclusion of the festival. The rite connected with the former is given in very detailed way, sometimes taking up one chapter of the text. In order to announce the commencement of the festival day, a parashava shall blow the conch sound next a big drum, and sound thrice the kettle drum with the left hand and thrice with the right hand. The festival is conducted daily in all days, both in the morning and the evening. The deity is taken through the streets of the locality, both in the morning and the evening. On both the occasions, Homa is performed by the Archakas, who undertake the responsibility of attending to the festival. Offerings are then made to the guardians of the quarters and also at the Bali Pitam, the pedestal intended for this, and permanently built by the side of the Dwajastamba. The idol of Sudarshana, or the deity of Sudarshana, is then taken around the locality of the streets. This is intended to make the streets safe for the procession which will follow. Right. So there, before the annual festival commences, Vikshraksena is worshipped, as he is the leader of the army of God. He is considered to be in charge of conducting the festival without inconvenience to anyone and providing security for the festival. The Utsava idol is then taken in procession with those of Sri Devi and Pusti, right, meaning Bhudevi, probably, on most of these days, and without them on a few days. So we say in Sri Rangam, we say that Ubayanachya, the two goddesses, will accompany Lord Ranganatha. With the exception of the evening on the day when the deity is taken around the streets in the morning in the chariot, there is a procession on all days, both in the morning and the evening. and usually after so many days of morning and evening ceremonies taking different palanquins and vahanas, there's the chariot festival. In the evening of that, there's no procession. There are specific vehicles, vahanas, in which the deity is carried through the streets. There's no direct statement in the text prescribing the use of particular vehicles on particular days in either of the sessions, of course, with some exceptions. The Polshkara Jaya, meaning Jayakya, and Satvara Samitas do not treat the Mahotsava, but curiously enough, the Jayakya, right, contains additional slokas in chapter 1 according to a manuscript which contains detailed information regarding the temple of the Lord at Kanchi and the festival conducted there annually in the Vishaka month. It is correct as to the details now obtaining to the temple. However, these slokas could be taken to have been deliberately interpolated with a view to present the greatness of this temple. Besides being considered as one of the 3 gems or the Ratnas, right? The Jayakya is very ancient and as such should conform to the contents of the other 2 Samitas, right? Meaning the Polshkara and the Satvara, which do not refer to the celebration of Mahotsava in the temples at Sri Rangam and Melkote, where these Samitas are followed. So the Polshkara and Parameshwara in Sri Rangam, the Jayakya and Padma in Kanchipuram, and the Ishvara and the Satvara and Ishvara in Melkote. Besides, the ancient Agama texts do not appear to have concerned themselves with such festivals in the temples.
Om Namo Narayana.